Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back, everybody. In this series, we've been reading pieces from Risale-İ collection. Last time, we started off with the 20th flush, that is Risale on Sincerity, İhlas Risalesi in original. As you are all aware, the idea is to study the text from beginning till end. So I tend to read more of the text and less of me explaining and talking. So as I said, we want to direct the viewer's attention to Risale-İ itself. Probably it is a fresh field for most people. Probably you have been reading and listening to it in its original form, but recently there is this demand for Risale-İ in other languages. English is obviously not my first language, but I spent a lot of time to learn and perfect it, and I thought, yeah, why not? We can do a series in English. Not that we are perfect in it, but at least we can show people the way how to read it, how to study it, and how to understand and analyze the text. So this piece was probably written almost 100 years ago, long time ago, but everything is still very fresh, very relevant, and very valuable. So Bediüzzaman wrote two pieces, two chapters. That's somehow strange. Normally, if he talks about one topic, he writes one chapter, one Risale. But on this occasion, we got 20th flush, 20. lem'a, and 21st flush, 21. lem'a. So there are some explanations and stories behind it. If you want to deep dive, I'm sure you can find very interesting anecdotes and nuggets on that. But as I said, İhlas Risalesi, Sincerity, comes in two parts, part one and part two. This one is obviously part one. Quick recap what this piece is about. There was a question which says why there is unity, collaboration, cooperation among disbelievers, whilst there is dispute, rivalry, and lack of collaboration and cooperation among believers. Probably if you're watching the news and following the current affairs, probably you're all aware of, sad developments in different parts of the world, where by default Muslims were supposed to support one another, but it seems that's not the case. So there is this visible conflict and hatred in some cases. So that's why the question is still very relevant and very applicable. So today we're going to read the third cause, according to Bediüzzaman, why disbelievers cooperate, collaborate, and unite, whereas Muslims and believers, they dispute and they have arguments, and there is visible absence of cooperation and visible presence of rivalry and hatred. So this is the third cause. I'm reading from the text. I think at some point I shared the link to this website. You can, it's erisale.com. You choose English language option and you go to the flushes. That's the name of the book. And you scroll down to the 20th flush. And this is the third cause. When we were doing this in Zoom, I used to share my screen directly and do a bit of technical guidance. But since we are using different software to broadcast this lecture, I am not able to do that. But in a nutshell, if you can go to erisale.com, choose English language, choose the book The Flushes, and scroll down to the 20th, and this is the third cause in that flush. So I'm gonna read from the text, And probably the editor will show you the bit I'm actually reading. The third goes. There we have it. So maybe we can zoom it in a bit so that people can read better. Disagreement among the people of truth does not arise from lack of zeal and aspiration, nor does union among the people of misguidance arise from loftiness of aspiration. Spot on. People of disbelief do not cooperate because they are holding the higher ground. They have the better values and they have this loftiness. And believers are not in dispute because their beliefs are not based on solid ground. That's not the case. That which impels the people of guidance to the misuse of their high aspiration and hence to disagreement and rivalry is the desire for heavenly reward that is counted as a praiseworthy quality in respect of the hereafter and extreme eagerness with respect to duties pertaining to the hereafter. Thinking to oneself, let me gain this reward, let me guide these people, let them listen to me. He takes up a position of rivalry towards the true brother who faces him and who stands in real need of his love, assistance, brotherhood, and aid, saying to oneself, why are my pupils going to him? Why don't I have as many pupils as him? He falls prey to egoism, inclines to the chronic disease of ambition, loses all sincerity, and opens the door to hypocrisy. This is spot on. This is the age of social media, age of YouTube, Instagram, or whichever one you're using. Everything is quantitative. You can count how many people are following you, how many people interacted with you, how many people, likes your content. And when I tell people, oh, I do this Risale-İ reading online, they say, oh, how many people watched it? How many likes? You see, our mindset is shaped based around materialistic philosophy. So everything is measured based on how much interaction you're getting, how much feedback you're getting. That's why when you watch stuff on social media, it says, please like and follow or interact, because there is this YouTube algorithm. If people, even they insult or give negative feedback, because of interaction, the algorithm brings it further up. I don't do that. Follow and like, etc. But my point is this: Bediüzzaman spotted this long time ago. This is two teachers. They are teaching and preaching and educating pupils, students, but one of them is probably more popular and the other one is jealous of him. He says, how come people go to his school, his madrasa, not to my madrasa? How come people go to his lesson and listen to his sermon, yani khutbah, not mine? So this was a default human psychology even before social media. There was this rivalry and jealousy. People want to be the one. Everybody says, oh, when it comes to Risale-İ, you should go listen to him. And if it is not you, that him, you suddenly get, hang on a minute, I'm better than him. How come it's not me, but him? So according to Bediüzzaman, according to Risale-İ, this is one reason why there is a lack of cooperation among people of truth, because everybody wants their school be more popular. everybody wants their channel to be, more followed. So, and Bediüzzaman says this is clearly a problem. Because if you are doing divine service, hizmet-i kutsiye, what we do is divine service. We are not doing this to become popular or become a celebrity or get lots of likes and earn money or get benefit out of this. This is completely against the foundational principle of Risale-i Nur and its teachings. We do this for the sake of Allah, fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah only, for the pleasure of Allah, for rizai ilahi, for divine pleasure. This is a divine service. This is not about people liking, giving you thumbs up, kudos, or chipping you money. No, it's not for that. And it should never be. And Bediüzzaman says, the moment it becomes the source of personal gain and benefit, not necessarily monetary benefit, it destroys your sincerity. I think probably you are seeing those famous scholars. Probably they were very sincere people at some point in the past. Probably they had their little school, little mosque where they were leading prayers and people coming for fatwas and advice, etc. Probably they were more sincere. Now they are on the social media, interact with people, they become celebrities. I always doubt, from the perspective of Risale-i Nur, once it becomes the source of you being a celebrity, sincerity just goes down the drain. Ikhlas just disappears. By definition, ikhlas, sincerity, means you do it for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of anything else, material or non-material. So, Bediüzzaman explains, this is a chronic disease of ambition, and the person loses all sincerity and opens the door to hypocrisy. So I'll just ponder on this a bit. So sincerity is ikhlas, doing everything for the sake of Allah and not seeking anything, any intangible benefits. This is ikhlas by definition. If you go into rivalry and try to be popular, the first thing you lose sincerity, and it opens door to hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, you try to appear as something you really, you are not really that person. You act more humble, more wise. So that's hypocrisy. I know this. That's why I always find, all my life I've been reading Risale-i Nur, taking part in circles and activities of the service. I can do that because it is not for profit and it is voluntary and there is divine satisfaction in it. But the moment they ask me to take a formal position, I'm always afraid of this hypocrisy, because I'm thinking, the moment I hold that position and title, you become unnatural. You start acting, someone as if he is more knowledgeable, more wise. No, that's not me. And I want to attain sincerity. I want to attain ikhlas. And I want to avoid this hypocrisy. So, I will quickly refer to the original, because sometimes I put notes on the original text and I find it beneficial. So if I go to, I read from the big old Risale-İ. So it says the third cause. Okay, so hypocrisy in original is riya. I was just looking for the original expression. Hypocrisy means riya. You become a hypocrite, riyakar. So, okay, let's move on to the second paragraph. The cure. Bediüzzaman, this is fantastic. He identifies the disease and he offers a solution. He's like a spiritual doctor. He says, this is the illness and this is the cure. So what is the cure? The cure for this error, this wound, this awesome sickness of the spirit is the principle that God's pleasure is won by sincerity alone. Always remember, how do you win Risale-İ ilahi, God's divine pleasure? How does God be happy with you? Bediüzzaman says, divine pleasure, Risale-İ ilahi, is won, is attained by sincerity alone, and not by a large following or great success. It is not a measure. You have prophets who had very few followers, but they're still prophets. They still get the reward of prophethood. No prophet is judged by the number of their followers. So what we do is essentially what prophets used to do. You know, emri bil maruf, nehy anil münker, and spreading the word of God. It is basically, in a nutshell, what we are doing. We are just following the tradition of the previous prophets. So it means we shouldn't have any new criteria to judge success. We cannot say Prophet Isa, Jesus alayhi salam, was more successful than Prophet Noah alayhi salam. He didn't have many. He had to build a boat and, you know, sail the floods. You see, in the Quranic, no such tool to judge the number of followers. So since we are doing something prophets used to do, we should stick to the same criteria. We should not measure our success by number of followers or amount of success. I read that expression once again. Divine pleasure, Risale-İ ilahi, is won by sincerity alone and not by a large following or great success. For these latter are a function of God's will. Okay, so making people listen to you, making people follow you, making people give you thumbs up, this is not your job. This is Allah's job. So Allah decides how many people will like and follow and interact. You just do your job sincerely, with ikhlas. Okay. For these latter are a function of God's will. They cannot be demanded, although they are sometimes given. Sometimes you do something good, and suddenly you realize, oh, quite a few people gathering around me and listening to me and, giving me thumbs up. That's impressive. Sometimes Allah sends people to follow you and to listen to you, although they are sometimes given. Sometimes a single word will result in someone's salvation and hence the pleasure of God. You don't know. I mean, you can fill a stadium and Apple launch event where, good old Steve Jobs comes to the stage and everybody's all in anticipation. You have it live on the internet. Everybody's watching, like the Oscars. The spiritual services, that's what we are doing, doesn't work like that. People do not necessarily accept your message because you got a fantastic stage, fantastic pyrotechnic explosions and 3D and holograms, and it's live. And no, it's not that. You may impress people with this kind of show to buy an EV or, I don't know, your latest smartphone. It might impress people. But what we do, and you can recall from your personal experience, spiritual matters influence people only when the message is sincere. I remember this person interacting with Hoca Efendi at some point, and he said, I just found him very sincere, genuine. That's the word he used. He's a genuine man, very sincere, very ikhlas, ikhlas the person. There is no hypocrisy, no riyah, no show off in his interactions. That's what he said. I thought it is true. People, they don't look how expensive your t-shirt is or how great your studio is. No, they just look. If you are a sincere person, once they think you're sincere, your message may have a better impact. Besides, it's not our duty to make our messages more impactful. It's against sincerity. So our job is just like Nike, just do it. Just tell people. Right, going back to the text. Bediüzzaman says, sometimes a single word will result in someone's salvation and hence the pleasure of God. Quantity should not receive too much attention, for sometimes to guide one man to the truth may be as pleasing to God as guiding 1,000. Moreover, sincerity and adherence to the truth require that one should desire the Muslims to benefit from anyone and at any place they can. To think, let them take lessons from me so that I gain the reward, is the trick of the soul and ego. Okay, so the last sentence. Sometimes the devil comes up to you and whispers into your ear. Şeytan-ı la'in, iblis. You're doing some good service. And devil says, oh, yeah, you should impress them. Let them take lessons from you so that you gain the reward. This is also a trick of the soul and the ego and the devil. All men greedy for reward in the hereafter and the performance of deeds entitling you to that reward. There have been certain prophets who had only a limited following, but received the infinite reward of the sacred duty of prophethood. The true achievement lies then not in gaining a vast following, but in gaining God's pleasure. What do you imagine yourself to be that's saying, let everyone listen to me? You forget your function and interfere in what is strictly God's concern. It is none of your business. You do your job, Allah will do his job. Let everyone listen to me. You think. You forget your function and you interfere in what is strictly God's concern. To gain acceptance for you and to have people gather around you is God's concern. So look to your own duty and concern and do not meddle with God's concern. Moreover, it is not only men who earn reward for those who hear and speak the truth. The sentient and spiritual beings of God and his angels have filled the universe and adorn its every part. If you want plentiful reward, take sincerity as your foundation and think only of God's pleasure. Okay, so this one is another interesting one. You know, you are, for example, in this room on my own. There is no real people, and I don't see anyone following this. It is sometimes a bit awkward. You know, I'm just talking to myself, and you're just thinking, "Oh, isn't this a bit pointless? You know, in a room on your own, by the sea, just talking Risale and stuff." This is spot on. But if someone says, when you speak, there are other sentient and spiritual beings of God, Melaike ve Ruh. You don't see them, but they are everywhere. So you don't know. Maybe not many people watching this, but maybe this room is filled with those sentient and spiritual beings, Melaike ve Ruh, angels. I don't know. Maybe they are sitting all over the place and listening to this lecture. So Bediüzzaman says, always think about this. You don't really know who Allah sends over to you to listen and get inspiration. They don't have to be human beings. They might be other spiritual beings. And the universe is filled with these spiritual beings. If you want plentiful reward, take sincerity as your foundation and think only of God's pleasure. Then every syllable of the blessed words that issue forth from your mouth will be brought to life by your sincerity and truthful intention, and going to the ears of innumerable sentient beings, they will illuminate them, and earn you reward. For when, for example, you say, praise and thanks be to Allah, Subhanallah, Walhamdulillah, Wallahu Akbar, etc., you do dhikr, millions of these words, great and small, are written on the page of the air by God's leave, since the all-wise inscriber, that's Allah Ta'ala, did nothing prodigally or in vain. He created innumerable ears, as many as were needed to hear those multiple blessed words. For example, when you do dhikr, you say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, whilst you are hiking in the mountains. Allah creates receptors to listen and get inspired by those words. They could be other living beings, not necessarily human beings, maybe the bugs, the birds, the trees, the particles in air, molecules, angels, souls. You don't know, you don't see them. You cannot really measure them. So always remember, there are billions, countless numbers of eyes and ears Allah created other than human beings. So it doesn't really matter if someone is listening to you. Maybe Allah is making so many other eyes and ears listening and following. Right, so last few, okay. Since all-wise inscriber did nothing in vain, he created innumerable ears, as many as were needed to hear those multiple blessed words. If those words are brought to life in the air by sincerity and truthful intent, they will enter the ears of the spirit beings like some tasty fruit in the mouth. But if God's pleasure and sincerity do not bring those words to life, they will not be heard, and reward will be had only for the single utterance made by the mouth. Pay good attention to this. You Quran reciters who are sad that your voices are not more beautiful and that more people do not listen to you. This is for Qaris, they recite Quran and they say, oh, I wish more people came and listened to me. My voice is not very good. My accent is not very good. And Bediüzzaman says, no, you cannot judge by number of physical people coming and saying, oh, nice. Because there are so many spiritual beings, eyes and ears, they appreciate the zikr, the recitation of the Quran. Nothing goes to waste. Very original points Bediüzzaman makes in this one. I mean, I'm always impressed. No matter how many times I read, I say, wow, this is so unique. So very relevant, very applicable to our current day. So this has been the third cause. That brings us to the fourth cause, but I'm going to stop here. And inshallah, God willing, we are going to continue reading the fourth cause on our next lesson. Okay, thank you for your time. Thanks for being with me. I'll see you on the next one, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.